Australia, late 19th century. A vast wild land where settlers carved out lives on rugged earth, and the rule of law was often challenged by desperate men and desperate times. Among the many stories that shaped Australia's identity, none captures the imagination quite like that of Ned Kelly. A bushranger, an outlaw, a symbol, and a man whose name has echoed for over a century. This is the real story of Ned Kelly, Australia's deadliest bushranger. Edward Kelly was born in December 1854 in the small town of Beveridge, north of Melbourne, Victoria. The son of Irish immigrants, Ned grew up in a large Catholic family plagued by hardship. His father, John Kelly, was a former convict who carried a criminal record from Ireland, a fact that shadowed the entire family. Life was not easy for the Kellys. The family struggled under poverty but also under the weight of heavy prejudice. During this period, Irish Catholics faced discrimination from the predominantly English colonial authorities. The police force, many of whom were Anglo-Protestant, were known to treat Irish settlers harshly, feeding a growing tension between the two groups. Ned's father died when Ned was just 12, forcing the family further into hardship and instilling in Ned a keen sense of responsibility. From an early age, Ned Kelly was exposed to police intimidation and injustice. His family and the wider Irish community were often targets of heavy-handed policing. One widely cited incident involved his mother, Ellen Kelly, who was fined and threatened with imprisonment under questionable circumstances. This chain of events deepened the Kelly family's resentment of law enforcement. Ned's personal experience of perceived injustice led him down a path mirroring that of his father, one of conflict with the law. At just 16 years old, Ned was convicted of assaulting a police officer during a fight and sent to prison for 3 years. This experience left a profound impact on him. In prison, he hardened, emerging with a fierce hatred of a system he saw as corrupt and disloyal to the Irish underclass. Instead of deterring him, prison only inflamed Ned Kelly's defiance. He returned to the countryside with a hardened resolve, and soon became involved in a series of smaller crimes, primarily cattle theft and horse stealing. These were serious offenses, often viewed as crimes of survival among struggling settler families. His repeated clashes with the police began to turn him into a marked man. In 1878, events escalated dramatically. Ned, his brother Dan Kelly, and their friends Steve Hart and Joe Byrne formed what would become the infamous Kelly Gang, a band of outlaws who would challenge the colonial government with bold and daring acts. The Kelly Gang quickly grew in notoriety. They were infamous for robbing banks in towns like Euroa and Jerilderie, and for their uncanny ability to disappear into the bushland, leaving police baffled. To many poor settlers, the gang was more than just criminals. They were symbols of resistance against oppressive authorities seen as corrupt and biased. One notable robbery in Jerilderie saw Ned Kelly and his gang storm the town, hold it hostage, and demand the government hearings be reformed, clearly showing a political edge to their outlaw activities. However, to the police and the establishment, they were cold-blooded criminals. Law enforcement increased efforts to capture them, vowing to put an end to their reign. In late 1878, police formed a special party to track down the gang. What happened over several days at Stringybark Creek remains one of the most critical moments in Kelly's story. The police ambushed the gang. In the ensuing gunfight, 3 police officers were shot dead and the Kelly gang successfully escaped. This incident transformed the gang's public perception. The authorities now labeled Ned Kelly a murderer, and the public soon understood him as Australia's most wanted man. In the months following Stringybark Creek, the Kelly gang took an extraordinary step that has become their legacy, forging homemade suits of bulletproof armor. Constructed from heavy plow blades and iron sheets, the suits covered their bodies and heads. The armor offered remarkable protection, enabling them to withstand police gunfire in later confrontations. The armor, while cumbersome and heavy, symbolized Kelly's cleverness and desperation. It epitomized the fight of an outlaw against a better-armed and relentless enemy. June 1880 brought the Kelly gang's final and most famous encounter with the law. The plan was audacious: derail a police train expected to transport reinforcements, ambush the officers, and escape. However, the plot was betrayed by a local informant. Police surrounded the gang at Glenrowan, leading to an intense and prolonged siege at a small hotel. Kelly and his gang, clad in their iron armor, held out against a hail of bullets. Dan Kelly and Steve Hart died in the battle, Joe Byrne was killed before the siege. Ned Kelly himself was shot multiple times but survived. Ultimately, he was captured. Ned Kelly's trial took place swiftly in Melbourne. Given the political and social climate, little doubt existed about the verdict. Found guilty of murder, Kelly was sentenced to death. On November 11, 1880, Ned Kelly was hanged in Melbourne jail. He was only 25 years old. Over the decades, Ned Kelly's story has become a pillar of Australian mythology. To some, Ned Kelly was a cold-blooded killer. To others, he's a symbol of resistance against injustice and tyranny. His life was shaped by poverty, prejudice, and harsh colonial law. His legacy endures in paintings, films, songs, and folklore, forever capturing the rugged Australian spirit. Ned Kelly's life was a tragedy and a legend. He was a man caught in the crossfire of history, society, and survival. His story highlights the complexity of colonial Australia, a world where the line between hero and villain was often blurred. More than a bushranger, Kelly is a symbol, both feared and revered, whose shadow looms over the Australian psyche even today. Ned Kelly, the deadliest bushranger Australia ever saw, remains a profound symbol of rebellion, resilience, and the harsh truths of a young nation. His story, raw, complex, and compelling, continues to captivate the world. This is the real Ned Kelly,